All right. Hello. I'd like to welcome anybody who is watching on either our YouTube or Twitch channels. And hello to any of you who are watching this afterwards. We are recording this on the 17th of November, 2021. And we have another community host to introduce. I am very excited about that. First of all, I'm Monica Ahens Madden, and I'm the Ubuntu community representative at Canonical. And it is so fun to get to outsource my job of making videos for the community and giving that to excited people in our community like Diogo. Now, I think I'm seeing some people from the Ubuntu Portugal community in the chat. And Diogo he is one of the members of the Ubuntu Portugal podcast. He is also a streamer on Twitch. And you please feel free to put those links for people so people can follow you. And he is joining us as our newest community host. And his first two streams, he has reached out because not only is he connected to the Ubuntu community in Portugal, which sounds like it is an amazing community. I can't wait to meet you all in person. But that community is also connected to other open source communities, and that includes the Ubuntu Flutter community. So he has Philippe Barroso here, and from the Flutter Portugal community, and they are going to give you a great introduction to Flutter, which is going to become very important for making apps in Ubuntu. So, gentlemen, it's great to have you here, and take it away.
Okay, thank you, Monica. So, as Monica said, I do a few community things. I am very involved with the Ubuntu Portugal community, also a bit with a few other friends from in Europe. I do hang around a lot with the other communities. I also was present in a couple of streams on DiogoOnAir, and you you guys and girls might recognize me from there. I'm also very involved with the UBports community. But with me today is Filipe Barroso. He's from the Flutter Portugal community. Hi, Filipe.
Hey, hello. Thanks for having me, man.
So maybe talk us a little bit about your experience with Flutter, assert your Flutter skills. It's a good opportunity.
Yeah. Not only I'm the organizer, one of the organizers of Flutter Portugal now for 2 years. We kind of founded it when Flutter went 1.0. It was about time, same day, let's do it. And I've been working professionally. I did the jump. As soon as I found a job, I said, okay, I'm dropping what I'm doing and I'm going to dedicate on Flutter fully. But of course, before having the job, I learned by myself. I contributed some open source projects. I did some projects of my own, and now I'm here and I hope to answer some questions, mainly what's Flutter?
And we already have that question on the chat. So hello, Yannick. Hello, Lapis de Cor. Hello, Reverend Fuzzy. And all others that are here. I just want to pitch in a little bit more this idea of having this stream, because if you are not a developer but you have watched these streams like the community hour or the desktop in Dabas, if you read frequently the Ubuntu blog or even watch Yannick streams on his channel, or Martin when he's talking about the GUI for the QuickEmu application, You might have heard about Flutter, but maybe if you are not a developer, you were not paying so much attention, or you are a developer but not in the mobile space, and you might have heard about it, but don't really know what it is exactly. Uh, uh, what is it good for? How does it compare with other options? What are its main concepts? So I guess you'll have the opportunity to get up to speed. Um, and that's why I asked Philippe and Danielle, which will join me also on the next session, to come and help me, because they are the experts. They have already joined me on Portuguese Ubuntu podcasts episode. No, a couple of them now, and they are great at explaining this, and I think they'll help you guys understand this much better. And you can bombard them with questions. So go ahead, leave them on the chat. I'll try to keep up and ask them, when it makes sense, either during the stream or in the end. Just to go back a little bit more, I'll be doing this type of streams. My idea is to do one thing that we do a lot in the Portuguese Ubuntu community, which is do cross-community collaborations. I want to bring here other communities which have good relations with the Ubuntu community, not only in Portugal but outside. And because Ubuntu is as useful as the things we can do on it, and these people are the best people to show us cool things we can do on Ubuntu. And we can also, on the Ubuntu community, learn about them. So this is a win-win. And if you already do this type of things in the Ubuntu community or on any other community, go ahead and contact me. You can find me on Twitter. My handle is @dmconstantino. You can also email me, diogoconstantino@ubuntu.com. But I'm pretty easy to find in many places. So go ahead and contact me. Maybe you'll be here in one of these weeks. But without further delay, Felipe, what the Flutter?
What the Flutter? Good question, and I'm glad that you ask. And just before I start my presentation, I will just like reinforce the idea that today I'm going to just give you an introduction to Flutter. But next time, my colleague and friend Danielle, that is in the chat, he will present more in detail Flutter for Ubuntu. Okay, but for now we'll stay with the basics. Sure. Let's dive in.
Let's go.
So just to start, my name is Filipe Barroso. I'm a senior Flutter developer at Pivotal. Before that, I've always worked with Androids. I developed Android apps since 2010. And then after some years, I decided to make the switch to work with Flutter. And besides that, of course, I'm also a community organizer. I organize Google Developers Group Lisbon, part of Lisbon Tech Alliance, also an umbrella of various communities in Lisbon, and also, of course, Flutter Portugal. But let's start with what is Flutter, okay? At the end of this talk, I hope that not only I'm able to answer any questions you might have about Flutter. So again, feel free to write in the chat, and if I don't see the question, Diogo, please interrupt me and ask away.
Yeah, I'll take note of them.
Awesome. And also feel free to ask me any questions meanwhile if you have them, okay? This is going to be a simple, but I want to give you a stage to have your questions answered. So, and at the end of of this talk, I also want you to be able to answer two questions. Why is Flutter different from other solutions for like this kind? And what's exciting about Flutter? Okay, I really want you to be excited with Flutter at the end of this talk. And so let's start with why is Flutter different, all right? So Flutter is a multi-platform development framework where you can develop with one code base for multiple devices, okay? So in the beginning, let's call it in the beginning, you were able to, in the stable version, to develop for Android and iOS with one code base. But over time, you are now able to develop for other platforms, for desktop, macOS, Linux, and Windows, and now also for web. Okay, so with one code base, you are able to develop for multiple platforms. And I'm going to tell you about a bit what's the difference of this Flutter in this regard. And so our goal here is with Flutter is to build an app, okay, software, let's call it an app. And when you, as a coder, your end goal is going to be always to have the code running on a certain device. Let's call it as I will say device in general. I will say just the device that is something that has a screen and some hardware, okay, to be able to run. But so we always want to have some code of our app to be able to run as a native code. And as I said, a device, let's define a device as something that has a platform, a way of a screen that has a certain canvas, and that can interact with certain events of touch, for example, user touching the screen. But also a device that has various services, can be location, Bluetooth, sensors, audio, camera, etc. Might have all of these, might have some subsets, doesn't matter, a mix of those. What Flutter does, just to give you like this, is it will compile directly into the native codes, and Flutter itself, with the compiled app, will communicate directly with the canvas, with our screen, and also interacting with the events of touch and all. So it's really compiled directly to native code. A bit more about that in the next slides. But also, of course, through some what we call platform channels, this is important, we are able to communicate with the devices, services through them. So, and again, I must underline this, it doesn't matter what kind of device it is, if it's Android, web, or even the desktop, of course. So while Flutter compiles directly to native codes, what are the usual or most common way to develop mobile apps? Okay, let's focus on now for mobile apps for more easily explanation, and let's put aside desktop and web. Okay, for the most common way to, and nowadays still common way to develop apps is through a certain original equipment manufacturer widgets. You can see these OEM widgets like Android SDK or the iOS SDK tools. What they do is they will give you certain components already predefined. You use those widgets, and it's going to be through those widgets that you communicate with the UI, you communicate with events. And maybe also, that might be wrong, but the widgets itself and other languages can communicate with the services. But these solutions, these kind of solutions using directly the manufacturer or OEM widgets has a certain problem. That is, you will need to code on the specific language to have your app running. For example, like I was wanting to talk about, in Android and iOS, you code in different languages, programming language. In Android, you code with Java/Kotlin, Kotlin being more famous, while in iOS you use Objective-C if you are that old, or Swift. So you end up having two code bases to do the same app if you want to do one app at the same time.
At least two.
Yeah, at least two. At least two, exactly. And so this can be a kind of burden. So many years ago, someone also came up with a solution that is, okay, disregarding the original equipment manufacturer widgets, those widgets, what they did was, okay, let's have a certain web view in which I can communicate with, that will be responsible with showing the icons and all the screen, all your codes visually on the screen. And also have a certain bridge that can I've seen this bridge in many programming languages. I've seen it most common is JavaScript, but I've seen it in C++ too. And this kind of solution is like what Cordova kind of do, you know. That's why you have a multi-platform, because you are able to, with a certain code base and through some web views, you are able to show some nice KB, but at least it's the solution they've found. A bit later, finding web views a bit burden. This kind of new way of coding an app, what they call, let's call this the native apps. They call, oh, it's an app that is native. What they do is they still use the OEM widgets, like for example, the Android SDK. But before that, they add a new layer. In this case, can be also many languages. The most common one is JavaScript. So they basically grab your code, you code on top of this bridge of a certain common language, and it's going to be of that tool, that tool that is responsible for compiling to native code and also communicating with platform, will have this overhead. So you might see that it's a bridge. It's, for some reason I call it bridge, because you need time to cross that bridge. You need time to communicate with your app on native codes and with platforms. So as you might imagine, if you have an app that is compiled to your system, to your device, in a language that your device can understand, without the need of OEM widgets, without the need of even this bridge to have a different language, you have an optimization directly there, okay? You are coding directly into native codes. And one thing, Tom, you're going to ask something?
Yeah, and that's what you get when you use Flutter, right?
Yeah, exactly. I will give you a bit more structure, but one thing I really always like to mention, that is, since also Flutter draws directly on the screen, okay, it's not through these OEM widgets, I don't know any other SDK, you can consider that the Flutter framework, this UI toolkit, it's closer to a game engine than any other ways of coding an app software. Because like a game engine has the OpenGL and other programming languages, and if you've downloaded a game into your mobile phone, you've noticed the game, it's the components, the buttons, the screen is always weird than a normal app, right? Because usually the game engine draws directly also into the screen.
I have read and heard that Flutter controls all the pixels.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good description.
A nice statement, because it's you control everything on the screen. You have really full control of it. You can use the basic widgets, a bit more into it, but in the end, you have full control of the widgets, and nice callback there. So, but moving forward, okay, this is what makes Flutter different. Okay, it compiles directly. There's no need for this bridge. It has full control of the screen. But what's exciting about Flutter? Okay, this is technical. Well, first of all, there's a certain catch, but it's an interesting way. Normally, the most common way is to code an app in an imperative way. Okay, you tell the screen, you tell the code how should it behave. While in Flutter, you code it in a declarative way. What does this mean? You define certain rules, okay, of how the data should be shown on the screen, and then every time the state changes, the information that needs to be presented in the screen changes, you have the rules to accomplish those. So you end up with a simple formula. This is just a formula. You are defining rules to present the information in a certain way, but you'll get there quite easily afterwards. But before getting to some examples, I want to tell you about the Flutter framework per se, okay? The Flutter framework divides in two parts, and being the framework itself, the most important way. The framework, we code Flutter with language Dart, Why Dart? Also, I'm going to delay that answer, that question for next slides. But basically, you have a framework all coded in Dart. You have on top, you have the design systems, like the ones implemented are Material for Android, for example, in Android, and Cupertino for iOS devices. So the Flutter itself gives you already widgets for you to show your data, your states, to create your app, like a Material app, like an Android app. And also, if you wish to have a pixel perfect identical app to iOS, you can use the Cupertino. But one of the best things about Flutter, there are many. One of them is that besides next to Material and Cupertino, you can create your own on top of the second layer, the widgets. Okay, you can create your own design system, and it's really encourage someone to do that.
So you can make your app look the same and feel the same in every operating system, in every platform.
Exactly, with one code base too. And the way it's, and my experience working with designers, and they have the freedom to draw and design their own design system. It's really awesome for them. Of course, then the less interesting layers, but also important, the rendering, the animation, painting, gestures, and everything on top of the foundation. So
yeah, Yannick is telling us on the chat that there's an upside and a downside for that canvas drawing. The upside is that you can draw whatever you want on the screen, and the downside is that Flutter may or will lag behind some of the native widgets and may not offer the latest, greatest UI guidelines for each platform.
That's true, but let's see how it goes. Mainly because, of course, Material and Cupertino, it's mostly backed by the Google team. But if you look into a bit further, you'll see that already exist many open source projects that are catching on for macOS screens and Windows. So there are already design systems for those. And even if it's kind of weird, it's just to extend that the answer for that. It's also when you are developing a Flutter app and you are going to use it in iOS and Android, it's kind of weird to use only one of them, only Material or Cupertino, because if you use Material, the iOS people will complain. And if you use Cupertino, the app in Android is going to be also weird. So ideally, when you create your own, of course, it doesn't have to be always like this. You can use Flutter only for iOS if you want, and then use Cupertino. So there's a lot of freedom here. And even if, but there's also a different catch and upside for having our own design is you can have the latest designs of Cupertino even in older devices of iOS. So it can be weird for Android's iOS Apple 5. I'm not really familiar with iOS, but an older device can have the latest and greatest UI thanks to Flutter if they want.
But, and as Yannick says, everybody should be using Yaru anyway.
Oh my, I'm not going that way, but let's go. So continuing with just the explanation here, we talked about the framework, always in Dart, but there's this secret sauce that lays under it, that is the engine. Okay, what is this engine? Well, for Android and OS, it's really more easily to understand. It was also the first one. So you have this engine in C++. It's the one responsible to building your app. Sorry, grabbing the Dart and compiling to the native code, compiled code. And in the Android and OS, there are three components important to mention. The Skia is the project that is responsible. To those who know OpenGL, Skia, it's an alternative way, let's call it, and it's the one responsible in drawing everything except the text on the screen. Okay, and then you have the Dart language itself. Why Dart? Stay tuned because I will tell you about it with all the frameworks and all the good stuff that brings. And then this last one that is removed or from powered by the Chrome team, Chromium project. It's really a component responsible in drawing text on the screen. And those who are familiar with Flutter might realize there are some issues with Flutter in terms of you cannot select. There are kind of tricky stuff with text, but again, text is not easy stuff to do. Well, this engine was for Android and iOS. What about if I want to build for web? Well, that's the thing. Instead of using the blue one for that I shared for Android and iOS, for web, instead of having that C++ engine, we have JavaScript/C++. So the Flutter framework will be compiled, transpiled to JavaScript. And there you can grab all the good stuff from the web. You can use WebAssembly, you can use WebGL also, and then of course the HTML, CSS. But you don't have to worry about that because you are always working on the green part. Okay, you don't have to worry about under it. But again, for those who are paying attention, I mentioned platform channels. So with platform channels, you can, if needed, you can go into the native language. If you are in Android, you can go and call something in JavaScript. You can use FFI in desktop to communicate something with the system. But Danielle, stay tuned for the second part. Danielle will talk a bit about that.
Yeah. You can also go have a look at the canonical GitHub repositories where they are doing a fair amount of that.
Mm-hmm. That's cool out. So the engine is really one of also our excellent things about Flutter, because if you have an engine working for grabbing the framework of Flutter and compiling to the app with the device you are working on, you have Flutter working. I even remember, and I'm still searching for it, the Google team has a big wall of big LEDs, and they basically grab a Flutter app, and they created an engine prepared to draw the app itself, some letters and some nice animations into that huge wall of LEDs. So it was a proof of concept, so to say that they are capable of building Flutter in any platform. What is necessary? Just somewhere to draw and some services to read from. So it's really amazing.
So apparently you are giving Yannick some crazy ideas.
Yeah, some years ago, I even, before this end of these times, troubled times, I even work a bit directly with Raspberry Pi, just with a small screen. I just said hello world, and I was really happy. But who knows what will happen in the future besides these better known devices? Tell me.
That might be a good idea for a crossover between our two communities and the maker community in Portugal.
Well, that's catch. We need to talk more about that later. So another question besides what is Flutter, and I hope you are getting the track of it. I've mentioned many times what a widget, but what is a widget? So I'm in these 4 screens. Many things are happening. Things are moving. We have static content in the 3rd screen. So which part of this are widgets? What of these screens are widgets? Can you tell me, Diogo?
So I guess anything can be a widget. A button can be a widget. An image can be contained inside a widget. And things that contain groups like lists and things like that are also widgets. So I guess this kind of...
That's what I wanted to reach to. Everything you see on the screen is a widget. Okay, besides the buttons of the Android you might see, and the top tooltip that I wanted to leave it, everything else is a widget, because everything is being written. Tell me.
That's kind of the mantra for Flutter, right?
Exactly. And since everything is drawn on the screen, you have already the 60, from the start, you have the 60 FPS fluidity of an app. Okay. This can be some GIFs, but they are really in the release mode. You have this fluent fluidity navigation and animations, and it's really amazing. And now a bit more about the framework. When you're coding with Flutter, you are 99% of your time in these parts, okay? Like I said, material compartment and some other widgets. You don't go much more away from this. It's as is. Because this toolkit, the Flutter, is already came with heavily with a lot of material widgets and components that you can use for the lists, as we saw before, animations, everything you might think of. And if you need something even more different, you can create your own.
Yeah.
So
that's what the team at Canonical did to integrate Yaru.
Exactly. And now in your screens, you can see is really a snippet of code of widgets for Flutter. So, and here I'm showing for the first time some code, Flutter code, just a small snippet, and you already can see the difference between the imperative way of coding apps, if you coded before some apps in Android or iOS, into a declarative way. You can see that it kind of inverted, but you can read it quite easily. You know, you have center, so you have something centered. That center widget that is will have a column. A column, as you might think of, is something vertically, right? And that column can, instead of the center can only have one child, column has multiple children, multiple childs, right? And that column, you can see that we are trying to present a text. Hola, multifish. It's like, hey, cool folks,
kids.
right? Cool kids. And afterwards a certain icon, an icon that is a star with the color green. So reading this, you can already make your minds, you can think of what should be the screen, right? And it's going to be exactly that. Vertically aligned items, widgets, centered on the screen, if this is the small screen available. And one thing amazing about this is this result will work, and these centers will be on the columns in every device you compile into. Okay, if you are running in iOS, it will be presented like this. If you are trying to run even on desktop, it's going to be presented like this. You can be sure how it's going to be things shown. So really powerful, right? So this was just a snippet of code, so I don't want to scare you. I want you to now jump to Dart language. So I'm really convinced that Flutter, it is what it is, thanks to the team of Google picking Dart for it. And I will say it's really super powered by Dart. Mm-hmm. And why is that?
Yeah, just before you go into that, there's a question from Yannick. Mm-hmm. He's wondering if I always wondered what the children array had to be typed. The compiler can infer the type without any problem. Is that some kind of optimization if you explicitly type, or if it infers, there is no impact?
No, it will infer. It's type safe. The language
but in terms of performance, is there an impact?
One thing that I'm aware of, I don't have the benchmarks for that. I think there are a lot of studies, type safe languages versus those who are not. I think even in Python, I think that discussion is even bigger. But I cannot tell you that. I cannot answer precisely. What I can tell you is the Google team haven't really focused on performance, improving performance in Flutter with Flutter, but still, you will get, unless you are really, really careless, you will always have that 60 FPS because since we are talking about user interfaces, we are talking about the limit of the user itself, a human being. So anything faster than the 60 FPS, it's kind of weird, you know. You want to have that line, perfect line.
Yeah, my guess is that because it's compiled, that will get started in compile time.
Exactly.
So I don't think it will have an impact. If we're talking about languages like PHP, Perl, or Python, then you might notice something. But even in those, there are a couple of optimizations that the languages do themselves, and at least they reduce them the impact a lot.
And that's a good question. Also, they made, because that's a good segue for what I want to talk next.
Oh,
and
cool.
Because
Not planned.
because no, not planned at all, really. Because it's perfectly normal to, when you are coding an app, to have two mindsets. You are developing your app, you're just trying to debug, you're coding, you're wanting to see the results, and then the end results. Okay, in this case for Flutter, it's the compiled, so it might be that the case. I don't want to speak more about really the details really of the performance in that regard, but I think it's not that important. But we always have these two types, and with the Dart language itself, what it gives Flutter, it's not only we have the just-in-time compilation, but also when you are, for example, working in a device of Android, what it will do is it will install in the device a virtual machine, and since every change of the code, it will only send the necessary changes to the VM. You have something that will listen a lot. You have the capability of a hot reload. So every time you are coding, you save your changes and you see immediately the changes on the screen. And that's one of the, again, one of big catches and awesome stuff about Flutter is you see it immediately. Again, I'm saying about mobile. For web, it's a bit different, and also for desktop. But if you're a mobile developer, this is awesome. And compared with Android and iOS development I've did and other solutions, this doesn't compare. And again, and you also have the guarantee that okay, when you deploy it, it's going to be exactly like you want it to be.
Yeah.
But then again,
Danny is saying hot reload is amazing. I would say it's hot.
Exactly, there's a hot, and stay tuned for more because there are other hot stuff to talk about. But this is for development. If we only had this, it's already amazing. But again, Dart only doesn't give us only the just-in-time compilation, but it will always also give us the ahead-of-time compilation, this compilation time. So and so you'll end up with your app in the native language that the machine can interpret, you know, and this is really amazing. So even if you can sense when you are developing a bit sluggish, sometimes maybe it's not 60 FPS, maybe it's a bit worse than that. But when you release the app, you definitely won't have any issues with performance-wise. Of course, there are some catches, but we are just talking about the general app development. So with Flutter and with Dart, Dart gives the superpower. Flutter is superpowered by Dart, also because of this JIT, virtual machine, ahead-of-time compilation, and this is amazing. And moving forward, that's how you also are able to get this fluent and 60 FPS apps that are incredible. So just to close a bit this section, just to recap of what I've talked about, with Flutter, you really have full control of the rendering stack, like we've mentioned. Everything is drawn on the screen and pixel perfect. We have this reactive views. I didn't mention before reactive views, but basically you don't have any bridge between the services, the canvas, and your code and your end result. And of course, you get these reactive views from the states because it's a declarative way. Then you have of course, great development experience with hot reload, but also great tooling for debugging, for checking the tree of your widgets and everything else. So you are not alone in that. You are not just coding. You have a lot of other tools. And of course, and really important, a fast, smooth, and predictable, here really predictable UI, no matter what platform you are at. And of course, the big catch of Flutter, you with one code base, maybe you want to do something different between iOS and Android, but with one code base, you are able to deploy for multiple platforms. And of course, instead of having many other code bases to handle, you only have to handle with one, which is amazing. So
just one question more before you go ahead and go to another topic. Danny on the chat is asking a question. Why with Linux as a deploy target, does it build to IoT or GIT?
That's an excellent question, and I've been focused more on web and mobile. And so I don't want to answer that question because I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, maybe Danielle, which is also on the chat, can answer that. Maybe he's more aware of that.
Yeah, I'm confident that's going to be ahead of time, of course, because you will compile into it. But the components of how they do it, I'm still not fully aware of that grasp. When it becomes stable, I will really look into it and be 100% sure of how it does. Okay. I knew that question was going to be asked, but I still haven't found really the correct way to answer it. Okay.
Yeah.
But be sure, as soon as I know it, I will let you all know.
Okay, let's go.
So, and also I want to just grab this sentence, even from 2019. Really, I've called it framework, I've called it many things, but in reality, Flutter is really a Google UI toolkit, okay? It builds beautiful natively compiled applications for mobile, web, and desktop. And why is it important to say that is a UI toolkit? Because even with a mobile app, some of you might know about Kotlin and how Kotlin has Kotlin multi-platforms. And so one thing that you can even have is you use Flutter for your front ends, and then you have the business logic in a different language. You might even have, for example, a lot of people have this use case. They have a library written in C++. They have a library, a proprietary library, unfortunately proprietary, that they need to communicate or create a UI to it. With Flutter, you are able to do that from FFI or through simple platform channels. They're able to add some UI components to their code. So that's really really important, and that's why it's important to call it a UI toolkit. Okay, and just to close this part, I just wanted to show you the growing, of course, of Flutter. It's catching on. It's 2.5 years per se. It's going to be since the version 1, and at least since 2019. The growth it's been a lot, and this year is going to surpass React Native. We have many other solutions. It also depends on what you are building, but it's incredible the growth of how many developers are adopting Flutter nowadays.
Yeah, that's the reason why Canonical decided to adopt Flutter, because we want apps to run on Ubuntu and on Linux in general, of course. And we need developers, lots of developers. So
Exactly.
that's the way it can happen. Of course, that Flutter is not the only option, but this is a really nice option to have.
Exactly. There are many others, and you might know some of them here as shown. But how are we on time? Because I've been answering some questions, but if we have a bit of time, I want to show some codes. May I?
Yeah, go ahead. I think we still have a little bit more of time.
Let me share my screen.
Okay.
Again. It's gonna be a bit tricky. I'm going to share my whole screen. I think it's safe. Okay. So
It's on screen.
okay, cool. So before we start this talk, we were here talking a bit before going live, right? And in that short time, you can remember, and Diogo, you won't let me lie. I built this small app.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
Maybe 20 minutes or less.
Exactly. And I really built this small app. The app is to do for today. So I do the presentation, and when I press enter, it will show the presentation and things like this. So quite nice, right? And I wanted to show you, this is always the app stopped, but I wanted to really show you the power of the hot reload here. As you might see the homepage here written, I might want to change it, maybe to have some exclamation marks, so I can save. It's still launching. Oh man, it's still launching. Just a second. This is the issue with Gradle, for those who are familiar with. So Flutter is not the issue here. It's really the Gradle still installing. As you can see, it's installing some stuff it needs. Already it's opening some widget inspectors, tooling that I need. Currently I'm using Visual Studio Code, but you can use many other solutions like IntelliJ or even Emacs to code.
I tried IntelliJ and Visual Studio Code, and I went for Visual Studio Code. It's more my style.
As you can see on the right, we now have the exclamation marks, but again, I can say homepage, and then I'm going to press now Control S. You can see on the top S, save. But of course, the gods of the demos are not helping.
That's the live demos are always the same.
Oh my god, why? Okay, but basically you can wait. I didn't change anything, of course, because you see changes, you need to make changes. Of course. Oh, here we go. You can see here now.
Yeah.
And
that
as
was
I mentioned,
quite fast.
it's the hot reload thing. It was not a problem of Flutter, it was my issue. And even I have a dragon just to delete notes like so. And of course, this is not Ubuntu talk if we don't compile to Linux, right?
Yeah.
To Ubuntu here. So what I have to do, I'm not going to use Visual Studio Code. I just want to show you the command line Flutter run, the same code base, same folder, and I will simply run for Linux. And it will build an app without changing any codes. I did here, okay. You can then test because it has these weird random letters. It takes a bit of time. But then what I'm doing here is basically, okay, I have the emulator running in another app, but I can also compile it to Ubuntu. And now I have an app running on Ubuntu.
Yeah, there we have it with the widgets, with the Yarrow look and feel.
And even I can just swap and works too. And that's it. Cool, man.
That's a cool demo.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to show for now. I hope you are now more excited. And even I've started a project with Daniel for developing an app for desktop. That's why I'm still also green in understanding how everything works for Flutter in desktop. But give me some time, I'll promise I'll be able to answer any question for desktop Flutter. But there are so many things now to understand, but it's really quite powerful.
So Rafael is telling technically it's not the Yarrow look and feel. Yes, but it comes very close to.
Yeah, that's, I don't know if
I was talking. Yeah, I was talking about the window, the decorations specifically. Yeah. So if you guys have, now? I'm certainly am, and I have to get back to my course because I was doing and a course on Flutter. I interrupted because of reasons. And I really need to go back, and I have a couple ideas of apps to do, which is something that I didn't have before. So I have an extra motivation. So, and yeah, that helps a lot if you already have an idea for an app to do, like Yannick did the quick QEMU app, the interface, of course.
Well, I'm sad to to read that people are not excited with Flutter with this after this talk. But I bet you're more joking. But of course, and it's like everything. The Flutter might not be the right tool for your app, but it is certain for me and for the code I work. And it's a new solution that you can have on your toolkit.
Okay. So, do we have any more questions from the public? Guys can go ahead and use Philippe for answering your doubts, because we have been answering the most of the questions, I think, during the presentation. I do not have any more on note, but okay, let's give a few more, one more minute or two, people to come around with ideas. On the next stream, we'll have Danielle, which will do a more hands-on introduction to Flutter, where we'll have more code and more desktop-y things. And maybe Philippe can join us. I don't know. But I still don't have the exact day, but we'll have that soon.
For sure.
Hello, all. That was a great stream. No, you guys did a great job. That was fantastic. And as soon as you have that date out, let me know. We'll get it on the schedule. We'll get it on Twitter. So this was really great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Again, thank you for having me and inviting me. It's always a pleasure for me to talk about Flutter. I'm really kind of addicted to it.
And if you guys speak Portuguese, you can go hear the Portuguese Ubuntu podcasts episodes that we did with them, and you can test that he can speak for a long time about Flutter.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that seems to be, once you get involved in Flutter, yeah, you do want to talk about it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've had that happen with Yannick, another one of our community members who's been getting into Flutter. So hopefully we'll have a bunch of people who come to your next stream. And as far as DiogoOnAir streams go, just our general ones, we will be here tomorrow at 12:45 Eastern, which is... let me double check that, because time math, this was the week that things just went really weird. Let me make sure I've got this right. Okay, yes. Tomorrow at 12:45 Eastern, which is 17:45 UTC. And I'll be chatting with Stu Karoff, who is a middle school teacher, and 11 of his students from the Penguin Corps. Yeah. So we're going to get to meet the future generation of the Ubuntu community here. And they're going to tell us about what they've been doing to install Ubuntu on donated laptops and make them available to their classmates, and some of the programs that they've started to pilot this year in their school, which I think is going to be a great talk. And then we will have Yannick on air. He will be November 30th. And at his usual time of 3:30 Eastern, which is 20:30 UTC. Yannick, please correct me if I got that wrong. And he will be talking with at least one person and maybe more from our foundations team.
That will be great. I'm sure I'm going to have to book a meeting with myself tomorrow during the stream, so that I can make sure to watch the conversation.
Yes,
With the
that's when you
painting
put
part.
busy on your calendar.
Yeah.
So, yes, exactly. Well, thank you all so much. And if any of you out there listening you are involved in the Ubuntu community and you've got something you want to share and you'd like to be a community host, please reach out to me, community@canonical.com. We've already got 3. We would love to have more. So,
well, thank you all, and see you next time.
all right,
Goodbye.
bye.